It all started on a sunny afternoon in a quiet neighborhood where most days were as peaceful as the chirping of birds in the trees. But today was different. A small dog, wagging its tail and looking for a bit of affection, unknowingly wandered into the wrong crowd. This wasn't just any group, they were the kind of people who thrived on negativity, judging anything and anyone that didn't fit their narrow perspective. At first, they scoffed at the dog, laughing at its scruffy fur and tiny frame. But then, their disdain turned into something worse. Without warning, one of them cruelly lashed out, kicking the innocent creature. The dog yelped, limping away with tears in its eyes, leaving the bystanders in shocked silence. It seemed like yet another instance where the weak were mistreated while those responsible walked away without a second thought. But what no one realized was that this moment was about to set off a chain reaction. A force greater than any of them, call it karma, justice, or sheer poetic fate, was already in motion. And within minutes, everything was going to change. What happened next would leave everyone stunned, proving once and for all that you can't mistreat the innocent and escape unscathed. Stay tuned to see how karma delivers a lesson they'll never forget. As the dog limped away, whimpering with every step, the group erupted into laughter. They didn't care about the pain they caused. To them, it was just a stray, a nobody. They brushed off their actions, high-fiving and congratulating themselves for their twisted sense of humor. The leader of the group, a tall and arrogant man with a permanent sneer etched on his face, turned to his friends. "See? It's just an animal." "It doesn't matter," he said, shrugging off any semblance of guilt. But what none of them noticed was the older woman across the street, sitting on her porch and watching everything unfold. Her sharp, observant eyes missed nothing, and her face darkened with disapproval. She didn't say a word, not yet. Instead, she reached down to her lap, where a larger dog rested its head, its ears twitching at the commotion. Meanwhile, the small dog hobbled toward a corner of the street, curling up behind a patch of bushes. Its breathing was heavy, and its tiny body trembled. A young girl riding her bike nearby saw the dog and stopped abruptly. Her wide, empathetic eyes filled with concern as she crouched down, trying not to scare it further. "It's okay, little one," she whispered, her voice soft and kind. She reached into her backpack, pulling out a sandwich she had packed for later. Tearing off a piece, she held it out to the dog. The creature hesitated but eventually inched closer, its tail wagging weakly. As the girl comforted the dog, the group noticed her and began mocking her from a distance. "Look at her," one of them sneered. "Wasting time on that thing." The leader smirked and shouted, "Careful, or you'll catch fleas." His friends burst into laughter again. The girl looked up, her face burning with a mix of embarrassment and anger. She wanted to say something, to stand up to them, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she focused on the dog, stroking its fur gently. The older woman across the street had seen enough. She rose from her chair, her dog standing beside her, sensing her agitation. As she crossed the street, her imposing presence silenced the group's laughter. "Is this what you do for fun?" she asked, her voice calm but cutting. "Picking on defenseless animals and children? You ought to be ashamed of yourselves." The leader rolled his eyes. "Mind your business, lady." "This is my business," she replied sharply. "And it's about to become yours too." The tension in the air was palpable. The group shifted uncomfortably, but the leader refused to back down. "What are you gonna do about it?" he challenged. The woman didn't answer immediately. Instead, she gestured toward the girl and the small dog. "Every action has consequences," she said, her voice firm. "You may not see it now, but life has a way of balancing the scales." As the group dismissed her words with more jeers, the woman turned and walked away. But there was something about her calm certainty that unsettled them. The leader tried to shake it off. "Crazy old bat," he muttered, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. Minutes later, as the group continued down the street, strange things began to happen. First, one of them accidentally stepped into a deep puddle, soaking his new sneakers. His friends laughed, but the mood shifted when another member tripped and fell face first into a pile of mud. Seriously? Watch where you're going. The leader snapped, growing irritated. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, the wind picked up. A strong gust blew debris and dust directly into their faces, forcing them to stop and shield their eyes. "This is ridiculous," one of them grumbled, sneezing as dirt filled the air. But the strangest occurrence was yet to come. A loud growl echoed from an alleyway nearby, stopping them in their tracks. They turned to see a large, muscular dog staring at them with unblinking eyes. It wasn't aggressive, but its presence was commanding, and it seemed to exude an almost supernatural aura. The group froze. "Whose dog is that?" Someone whispered nervously. "I don't know," the leader said, his voice wavering for the first time. "Let's just keep moving." As they hurried away, the dog didn't chase them but stood its ground, watching until they were out of sight. Unbeknownst to the group, the older woman had seen the whole thing from her porch, a knowing smile playing on her lips. Beside her, her own dog wagged its tail, as if sharing in her silent satisfaction. Meanwhile, the girl who had helped the small dog decided to take it home. She cleaned its wounds, gave it water, and wrapped it in a warm blanket. The dog's eyes, once filled with fear, now gleamed with gratitude. What the group didn't realize was that their actions had set off more than a string of misfortunes. Their cruelty had sparked a series of events that would soon come full circle, teaching them a lesson they would never forget. And this was just the beginning. Something much bigger was coming, something they could never have anticipated. As the group hurried away from the alley, their nerves were frayed. They couldn't shake the eerie sensation of the dog's unwavering stare or the strange misfortunes that seemed to be piling up. The leader tried to brush it off, forcing out a laugh. "It's just a dog," he said, though his voice betrayed his unease. "We're fine. Let's just forget about all this." But the others weren't so sure. The memory of the woman's words lingered, gnawing at the edges of their confidence. One of them spoke up, a hint of fear in their voice. "Do you think she was right? About consequences?" The leader glared at them. "Don't start. That old woman doesn't know anything." Yet, even as he said it, doubt crept into his mind. The air around them felt heavier, as though the world itself was watching, waiting for something to unfold. Meanwhile, back at the girl's house, the small dog had finally begun to relax. Wrapped in the blanket, it lay on a soft cushion, its tail thumping gently against the floor. The girl had named it Lucky, a hopeful reminder that despite everything, the little dog had found safety and kindness. Her parents, initially hesitant about keeping a stray, saw the bond forming between the two and softened. "We'll see how things go," her father said with a smile. "But I think Lucky's found the right place." Across the street, the older woman watched the scene from her porch. A sense of quiet satisfaction filled her as she saw the girl's kindness rewarded. Her own dog, still by her side, gave a low, approving bark. But the story wasn't over yet. Later that evening, the group of bullies decided to meet at their usual hangout, a park just outside the neighborhood. As they sat around, trying to shake off the events of the day, strange things began happening again. First, their phones, which they had been mindlessly scrolling, suddenly froze. Screens flickered, apps crashed, and no amount of restarting seemed to fix them. "What's going on?" one of them asked, frustrated. Then, the leader's prized leather jacket, which he had carelessly thrown onto a nearby bench, was snatched by a gust of wind and dragged through the dirt. He lunged to grab it but ended up tripping and falling into the mud again. The others couldn't help but laugh, but their amusement was short-lived. Overhead, dark clouds began to gather, and the air grew thick and heavy. A rumble of thunder rolled through the park, making them jump. "Maybe we should go," someone suggested nervously. But before they could leave, they heard a sound that froze them in their tracks, a low, guttural growl. Turning slowly, they saw the same large dog from before, standing at the edge of the park. Its eyes gleamed in the dim light, and it took a deliberate step forward. The leader tried to act tough, picking up a stick and waving it threateningly. "Get lost!" he shouted. The dog didn't flinch. Instead, it let out a deep bark that echoed through the park, making the group scatter in fear. As they ran, the leader tripped once more, landing hard on the ground. "Wait for me!" he shouted, but the others were too panicked to listen. When he finally got up, the dog was gone. The park was silent except for the sound of his labored breathing. He stood there alone, the weight of his actions sinking in. For first time, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years: shame. The next day, the group didn't meet. Each of them, in their own way, was grappling with what had happened. The leader, now walking with a slight limp from his fall, found himself thinking about small dog they had mistreated. He couldn't escape the image of its scared eyes, its helpless yelp. Unable to shake the guilt, he decided to visit the girl's house. When he arrived, he saw her playing in the yard with Lucky. The sight of the happy dog and the girl's laughter made his chest tighten. He hesitated, unsure of what to say, but the girl noticed him. Her smile faded, replaced by wary curiosity. "What do you want?" she asked, holding Lucky close. He swallowed hard, his pride warring with his newfound conscience. I wanted to say I'm sorry," he said finally. "For what we did to your dog. It was wrong." The girl studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Lucky's okay now. But you shouldn't hurt animals. They don't deserve it." "I know," he said, his voice quiet. "I won't do it again." From her porch, the older woman watched the interaction with a faint smile. Perhaps, she thought, there was hope for redemption after all. As the days passed, the group began to change. Their encounters with the dog, the old woman, and the strange string of events had left a lasting impression. One by one, they started to take small steps toward being better people. The leader even began volunteering at a local shelter, surprising everyone who knew him. The little dog, Lucky, became a symbol of resilience and kindness in the neighborhood. People who had once ignored the stray now stopped to pet it and offer treats. And the girl who had taken Lucky and found a new sense of purpose, advocating for animals and encouraging others to treat them with compassion. In the end, the story wasn't just about the dog or the group that had mistreated it. It was about the ripple effects of cruelty and kindness, and how even the smallest actions could lead to profound change. The older woman, watching it all from her porch, knew this to be true. Life had a way of balancing the scales, and sometimes, it just needed a little nudge. With a contented sigh, she leaned back in her chair, her faithful dog at her feet, knowing that justice, whether through karma, fate, or sheer determination, had been served.